Good day everyone, I am Nikathea Deep Hunting and today I will be discussing about the 2004 revised implementing rules and regulations of the National Building Code of the Philippines. I will be starting from rule number 4 since ma'am already discussed the rules 1 to 3. For rule number 4 talks about the types of construction. Section 401. For purposes of the code and its IRR, all buildings proposed for construction shall be classified according to the following types. So when you propose a building for construction, it shall be classified for these 5 types of construction. So the first type we have here is the type 1 shall be of wood construction. So as you can see in this picture, all structures are made of wood and the structural systems may be any of the materials permitted by the code. So when your proposed constructions are all made of wood, then it shall be classified as type 1. Next, the type 2 shall be made of wood construction with protective fire-resistant materials and 1R fire-resistive throughout, except that permanent non-bearing partitions may use fire-retardant treated wood within the framing assembly with 1R resistivity. So an example for type 2 can be seen in this picture. As you can see, the materials are made of wood, but the man here is using a fire retardant paint for wood that prevents fire and increases safety. So this is the example of the type 2 types of construction. For the type 3, shall be of masonry and wood construction. Structural elements may be any of the materials permitted by the code provided that the building shall be 1R fire resistive throughout. Exterior walls shall be of incombustible fire resistive construction. So an example of type 3 can be seen in this picture. As you can see, this building here is made of masonry walls with wood frame construction. For type 4 shall be steel, iron, concrete, or masonry construction and wall ceilings, and permanent partitions shall be of incombustible fire-resistive construction, except that permanent non-bearing partitions of 1R fire-resistive construction may use fire-retardant treated wood within the framing assembly. So when we say incombustible, means that it is made of materials that does not burn if exposed to fire. So this is an example of the type 4. And for the last type of the construction is a type 5, shall be 4R fire resistive throughout and the structural elements shall be of steel, iron, concrete, or masonry construction. So type 5, as you can see in this picture, generally speaking, this building are more than 75 feet tall, including high-rise housing and commercial spaces. Because of their materials and design, these buildings are considered the most robust in case of fire, able to withstand high temperatures for a long time without collapsing. So for section 402, changes in type. No change shall be made in the type of construction of any building which would place the building in a different subtype or type of construction, except when the changes is approved by the building officials upon showing that the new or proposed construction is less hazardous based on life and fire risk than the existing construction. So you may not be able to change the type of construction of any building except if the newly proposed construction is being approved by the building officials and also if the new one is less hazardous, means that it is less risky or dangerous based on life and fire risk. For section 403, requirements on type of construction. So the first one of the requirements is the fire resistive requirements. Its subtypes are the structural frames. So when we will be making a structural frame, it should be a 1R fire resistive rating if your building construction are classified into types 2 and 3. If it is classified into type 4, then your structural frame must be 2Rs of fire resistive rating. And lastly, if your building is classified into type 5, then your structural frame must be a 3R fire resistive rating. So for the next subtypes are the interior bearing walls, permanent partitions, floors, and the roofs. So if your constructions are classified into types 2, 3, and 4, then your interior bearing walls, permanent partitions, floors, and roofs must be 1 hour of fire resistive rating. Then if your building is classified as type 5, then you must have 3 hours of fire resistive rating and 1 hour for vertical opening, floors, and roof. So next is the exterior doors. For exterior doors and windows, it shall have 1R fire resistor rating for all types. So next is the interior walls and ceiling finishes. So finishes for interior walls and ceiling of any building shall be classified according to their flame spread characteristic using generally accepted engineering standards. So you need to classify the flame spread characteristics by using engineering standards. So flame spread characteristics of finishes shall not apply to frames and trim of doors and windows and to materials which are less than 1 millimeter in thickness cemented to the surface of walls or ceilings. Materials required to be flame spread proofed shall be treated with a flame retardant having a flame spread of 50 or less as determined by the tunnel test. So standards for materials used in structural framework, exterior walls and openings, floors, exits, stairs, and roofs shall be governed by the pertinent provisions of the Fire Code of the Philippines. So for example, like fire exits in the building must be governed by the fire codes of the Philippines. So that's the end for the rule number 4. Let's then proceed to rule 5, which is the requirements of fire zones. Section 501, Definition of Fire Zones. Fire zones are areas within which only certain types of buildings or structures are permitted to be constructed based on their use of occupancy, type of construction, and resistance to fire. So not all areas permitted to construct fire zones. So an area of a city or municipality that has a certain level of fire risk associated with it as defined in the building code, the relative risk is predicted on density, land use, and existing type of construction in the area. For section 502, building located in more than one fire zone. A building or structure which is located partly in one fire zone and partly in another shall be considered to be in the more highly restrictive fire zone when more than one-third of its total floor area is located in such zone. For Section 503 or moved buildings, any building or structure moved within or into any fire zone shall be made to comply with all the requirements for buildings or structures in that fire zone. For number 2, this shall also apply to pre-engineered or prefabricated buildings or structures that may be dismantled and reassembled. For Section 504, temporary buildings or structures. Temporary buildings, such as reviewing standards and other miscellaneous structures conforming to the requirements of the code and sheds, canopies, and fences used for the protection of the public around and conjunction with construction work may be erected in the fire zones by social permit from the building official for a limited period of time, and such building or structures shall be completely removed upon the expiration of the time limit stated in such permits. Erection of the temporary buildings or structures to be located in restrictive and highly restrictive zones and which do not conform with the type of construction allowed or permitted within such zones may be allowed by the building officials for a given period of time provided that fire protective or preventive measures and fire suppression facilities are adequate. For Section 505, center lines of streets. The center line of adjoining street or alley may be considered an adjacent property line. Distances shall be measured at right angles to the street or alley. Section 506, Restrictions on existing buildings. Existing buildings or structures in fire zones that do not comply with the requirements for a new building erected therein shall not hereafter be enlarged, altered, remodeled, repaired, or moved. Sections 507, Designation of Fire Zones. The legislative body of the LGU may enact ordinances for the purpose of designating fire zones based on the parameters and guidelines set forth in this section. Designation of fire zones is purposely for management, prevention, control, and suppressions of conflagration that may occur in population centers. So that's the end of Rule 5. Let's then proceed to Rule 6, which talks about the fire resistive requirements in construction. Section 601 talks about fire resistive rating. Fire resistive rating means the degree to which a material can withstand fire as determined by generally recognized and accepted testing methods. Section 602 Fire resistive time period rating. Fire resistive time period rating is the length of time a material can withstand being burned, which may be 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, and etc. Section 603 Fire resistive standards. All materials of constructions and types of materials and assemblies or combinations thereof shall conform to the fire resistive ratings. Section 604 Fire resistive regulations. The Secretary shall prescribe standards and promulgate rules and regulations on the testing of construction materials for flame spread characteristics, test on fire damages, fire test of building constructions and materials, door assemblies and tin-clad fire doors and windows assemblies, the installation of fire doors and windows and smoke and fire detectors for fire protective signaling system, application and use of controlled interior finish, fire resistive protection for structural members, fire resistive walls and partitions, fire resistive floors or roof ceiling, fire resistive assemblies for protection of openings, and fire retardant roof coverings. And that's the end of rule number 6.
Hi, I'm going to discuss Rule 7 classification and general requirements of all building by use and occupancy. In Section 701, Occupancy Classified. There are 10 classification of occupancy based on their uses. Group A, we have residential dwellings such as family dwellings, dormitories, townhouses, etc. Group B, we have residentials which have multiple dwelling units such as hotels and apartments. Group C, we have educational and recreational, such as schools and daycare centers. Group D, we have institutional, such as hospital, nurseries, jails, and prison. Group E, we have business and mercantile, such as gas station, wholesale and retail stores, office building, etc. Group F, we have industrial, such as factories and plants. Group G, we have storage and hazardous, or structures that store and handles hazardous and highly flammable materials. Group H is assembly other than Group I, or assembly building which have less than 1,000 occupancy load. And Group I, assembly buildings that have occupancy load of 1,000 and more. Group J, we have accessory such as private garages, carports, fences, stages, etc. For this discussion, we're only going to focus on the residentials and rules and requirements that pertain to the residential dwellings. So we're going to focus on Group A. In Group A, there are two divisions. In Division 1, we have building exclusive to single-family occupants, such as single dwelling, staff housing, or we also have places of worship, such as churches, community facilities and social centers, such as parks and playgrounds and clubhouses, and recreational. This specifically governed by private individuals such as membership organization for the benefit of their members present in golf clubs. Division 2, use of non-leasing occupants not exceeding to 10 persons, such as single detached or a duplex or townhouse. Dormitories, such as school dormitories and police barracks, and outpatient clinics, such as lying-in clinics and clinical laboratories. Section 702, change in use. A building occupancy can only be changed if it complies with the requirements of the new code of occupancy or group or division, or the new occupancy group is less hazardous based on life and fire risk than the existing occupancy group, which is decided by building officials. Section 703, mixed occupancy. General requirements. When a building has more than one occupancy, the whole building has to comply with the requirement of the most restrictive occupancy group, except if it is a one-story building. Each portion of the building conforms to the requirements of the classification group it is used for. And if a group occupies just less than 10% of the total area of the building, the whole building should conform to the majority group classification requirement. Number two, forms of occupancy separation. Any type of occupancy separation can be used to completely separate various occupancy groups. Number three, type of occupancy separation. So there are four types. One are fire resistive occupancy separation. Two are fire resistive occupancy separation. Three are fire resistive occupancy separation. And four are fire resistive occupancy separation. Section 704, location on property. All proposed buildings shall be built with a direct access to public space. So tanan nga property or tanan building na ay access sa dalan. The center line of the streets shall be considered the adjacent property line. Eaves shall not be less than 750 millimeters from the side and the rear property line. So eaves mo ni siya tong labaw nga atok sa imong building. Fire resistance of walls. Exterior walls shall have fire resistance and opening protection. The requirement of an opening protection depends on the distance from the house to the property line. Number three, buildings on the same property and buildings containing courts. Building in the same property must have a imaginary property line between them. So kung duha ka building sa isa ka property, dapat mo na siya property line kumbaga sa ilang tunga. And a new building must be built after the assumed property line of the building. So kung bag-o existing a building sa isa ka property din maghimo na pud kag bago nga building, imuhang itukod ang bago nga building after sa katong proposed or imaginary nga property line sa old nga building. Two structures can be considered. One, if their aggregate area is under the allowable floor area of one building. Number four, building footprints and firewall. Without a firewall, a building footprint must be measured from the distance perpendicular to the property line to the outmost face of the external walls. The distance must conform to the requirements in Rule 7 and Rule 8. Footprint based on firewall provisions. Firewall on one side. Building footprint measured from the firewall to the external wall. 2. Building firewall on two sides. Building footprint measured from firewall to the external wall of the building. Absolutely no firewalls are allowed for low density areas are 1. Medium densities are 2. Only one firewall can be erected in the maximum of 80% of the total length of the property line. In high density residentials R3, there are two types of firewalls that can be erected. Firewalls on two sides and firewall on one side property line at the rear property line. For townhouses, residential R4, firewalls on two sides of each of the townhouses may be permitted. In residential condominium R5, there are also two types of firewall that can be erected. Firewalls on two sides of the building and firewalls on one side and at the rear property line. All existing openings on the firewall shall be sealed completely to maintain the fire integrity of adjoining building and structures. Section 705, allowable floor area or the total gross area, TGFA. In order to calculate TGFA, we must consult the table 7.1 as shown here on the screen. It is also important to cross-check TGFA with the allowable maximum volume building or AMBB. So as you can see here in the table, we have multipliers 3, 5, 12. This represents the number of floors on the building, and the percentage 70%, 80%, 60% are the AMBF or the maximum building footprint expressed in percentage of the total lot area TLA. In this PowerPoint, we only focus on the residential calculation of the TGFA. There are more of this table pertaining other parts of other different occupancies. Section 706, allowable floor area increases. So, pwede mo nimo mapadaka ang imuhang floor area sa imong building depending sa existence of public space, streets, or yard nga naa sa imuhang property. Nasa imong kilid, isa gikilid sa imong property. Section 707, maximum height of the building. The maximum height of the building depends on the occupancy, type of construction, and user population density, light and ventilation, width of road right of way or RROW, building bulk, zoning regulations of the place, and the environmental consideration. Determination of building height or the building height limit BHL is based on the occupancy and application of the development controls. So, based sa imong occupancy sa imong building, mo pud na mag-determine kung unsa kataas ang imong building. The measurement of the building height is measured from the established grid line to the topmost portion of the building. Here in table 7.2, we see the building height limit of a building based on the occupancy of the building. Again, napay continuation ani nga table para sa commercial and other groups of occupancy, but since we're only going to focus on residential, kanilang residential akong ipakita. Basing on the figure 7.2, we can see here na kung slope ang imuhang gitukuran, ang pag-measure sa imong height sa building gigikan sa pinakataas sa slope padulong sa pinakataas sa building, provided nga imuhang ang height sa imong slope gikan sa pinakataas nga part sa slope padulong sa pinakaubos nga part sa slope is less than or equal to 3 meters. If imong building kay tapered ang iyahang atop, ma-measured ang height sa building gikan sa pinakaubos or the established grade line padulong sa 1/2 sa tapered sa imuhang atop. Dayon kung ang imuhang slope is more than 3 meters, ang pag-measure sa imuhang height sa building is from 1/2 sa slope or 1/2 sa kataas-on sa slope padulong sa pinakataas sa building. As you can notice, wala niya giapil ang tower sa taas sa mga building. We also have rules regarding for the building height limit for aviation or the airports, aircraft hangars, pero dili na nato siya apilon sa itong discussion. Other considerations in height determination are the present and projected population density within the project site, then a lesser percentage with a given building bulk, a lesser percentage of site occupancy or BSO, and allowable maximum floor footprint or AMBF or maximum allowable construction area or MACE may be built higher than those with greater PSO, AMBV, BF, or MACE. Greater TGFA requirements can be built bigger than lower TGFA requirements. Higher FLAR designation and rights may be built higher than lower FLAR designation rights. Lots that face a wider RROW may become a site for a taller building structure compared to a lot facing a narrow RROW. So we have examples here. For RRO of 6 to 7 meters wide, ang building height limit kay 3 stories or 9 meters maximum. For 4 to 5 meters wide, ang iyahang BHL is equivalent to 2.5 stories or 7.5 meters maximum. And for 3 meters wide or less, BHL equivalent to 2 stories or 6 meters maximum ang pwede matukod ato siya nga property. Other considerations are soil characteristics and lot location. Lot location in two-fold lines and earthquake belts or proximity to volcanoes and other geological conditions. Hydrological conditions such as water table, at the site and distance to the waterways and shorelines. Meteorological conditions such as the frequency and intensity of destructive typhoons and monsoons. Effects of environmental conditions on building or structure and vice versa. Effects of traffic conditions on the building or structure and vice versa. And lastly, availability and capacity of public utility and service systems. Section 708 Minimum Requirements for Group A Dwellings. Number 1. Dwelling locations and lot occupancy. A dwelling shall occupy not more than 90% of the corner lot and 80% of the inside lot. Number 2. Light and ventilation. Every dwelling shall be constructed with the arranged as to provide adequate light and ventilation. Number 3. Sanitation. Every dwelling shall be provided with at least one sanitary toilet and adequate washing and drainage facilities. Number 4. Foundation. Footings shall be of sufficient size and strength to support the load of the dwellings and shall be at least 250 millimeters thick and 600 millimeters below the ground. Number 5. Posts. Each post shall be anchored to such footing by straps and bolts of adequate size. So here in table 7.5, natry ang dimensions sa wooden posts or super tails sa mga types of building. Number 6, floor. The live load of the first floor shall be at least 20 kilograms per square meters, and for the second floor, at least 150 kilograms per square meters. Number 7, the wind load for roof shall be at least 120 kilograms per square meters for vertical projection. Number 8, stairs shall be at least 750 millimeters in clear width with a rise of 200 millimeters and a minimum run of 200 millimeters. Number 9, entrance and exit. There shall be at least one entrance and another one for exit. Number 10, electrical requirements. All electrical installations shall conform to the requirements of the Philippine Electrical Code. Number 11, mechanical requirements. Mechanical systems and or equipment's installation shall be subjected to the requirements of the Philippine Mechanical Engineering Code. Determining building bulk or the volume quantity of the building shall generally be determined by the application of floor lot area ratio or FLAR. So using the table here, table 7.g.1, nadiri ang FLAR based sa occupancy and residential zoning sa isa ka building. So kung R1, 1.5 ang iyang FLAR. Again, we will only focus on the residential, na pay lahi diri nga pang commercial or pang industrial. Pero focus natin sa residential. Establishing the outermost space of the building OFB. The OFB shall be primarily determined by the vertical projection of the outermost space of the allowable maximum building footprint or AMBV up to the height prescribed by the applicable building height limit BHL. So table 7.g.3 shows the recommendation angles and slope for the angle plane originating from the center line of the RRO. Bali mo na siyang pinaka front sa imuhang building. So mo ni siya ang table 7.3.7.g.3 nga shows ang slope and angular plane depending sa kadakon sa imuhang RROW. Quantifying AMVB. AMVB shall be primarily determined by the following. Multiplying AMBF, or the allowable maximum building footprint in square meters, for the lot by the applicable building height limit BHL in meters for the lot to arrive the initial AMVB in cubic meters. Then superimpose the angular plane originating from the center of the RROW on the footprint prism. So, makuha daw nimo ang AMVB, ang initial AMVB, by multiplying the AMBF sa BHL. So, kung imo na nang i-multiply, more nang din kag na 3D nga structure, 3D nga model sa imuhang structure. Mag-superimpose rin kag ang angular plane nag-originate sa center of the RRO. Ang angle sa angular plane nga imong superimpose kay magikan aning table 7.3.g.3. Applicable of development controls or DC. This is to determine the maximum development potential of a lot. So to determine the allowed or appropriate building bulk of the lot or the building, the following series of steps using DC under this guideline and other rules in the codes shall be followed. So step 1, determine the allowable maximum building footprint or AMBF. So AMBF, allowable maximum building footprint, is equals to total lot area TLA minus land area required for yards or courts, which is nasa Rule 8, plus additional buildable lot area due to firewall construction. Step 2, check resultant building footprint against PSO. So kaning PSO rules regarding a PSO na siya sa Rule 8. Ang iyahang formula kay PSO is equals to allowable maximum building footprint AMBF divided by total lot area TLA. Number 3, compute the resultant height of the building or structure. So resultant height in meters is equals to BHL or building height limit or times the desired floor to floor height in meters. Step 4, check the resultant height of the against the BHL. Kung mas ganahan ka nga mas taas pa yung height ng building, i-consult nimong mga zoning sa place sa imuhang tukuran kung sugot ra ba ang unsa. Kung dili man, kailangan nimo i-adjust imong floor to floor height. Step 5, establish the outermost face of the building OFB. So, to determine the allowable maximum volume of the building and to satisfy natural light and ventilation requirement for the RRO and RROW and front yard abutting RROW. Step 6, compute the maximum allowable gross floor area GFA. So GFA is equals to total lot area TLA times recommended floor to lot area ratio or FLAR. Last step, step 7, determine the allowable maximum total gross floor area TGFA. So TGFA is equals to gross floor area GFA plus non-gross floor area minus all requirements and courts of all floors under Rule 8. We have rules and regulations and rules regarding the building and other accessory structures within the cemetery and memorial parks, but dili na nato siya i-discuss apil kay residential man na itong i-focus. Pero naa siya rules regarding ani sa rules.
Good day everyone. So we are now in the rule number 8, light and ventilation. In constructing a building or infrastructures, we need to consider these sections under the rule number 8. For the section 801, general requirements of light and ventilation. Every building shall be designed, constructed, and equipped to provide adequate light ventilation. And take note, all buildings shall face a street or public alley or a private street which has been duly approved, and no building shall be altered nor arranged to reduce the size, and no building shall be enlarged so that the dimensions of the required court or yard would be less than what is prescribed for such building lot. In section 802, measurement of site occupancy. The measurement of site occupancy or lot occupancy shall be taken at the ground level and shall be exclusive of courts, yards, and light wells. Courts, yards, and light wells shall be measured clear of all projections from the walls enclosing such wells or yards with the exception of roof leaders, wall copings, seals, or steel fire escapes not exceeding 1.20 meters in width. So in section 802, this illustration shows the measurement of site occupancy. We have here the color orange, the actual building footprint based on clients and code requirements. And here the outside line is the AMBF, or based on minimum setbacks. In section 803, percentage of site occupancy. Here are the minimum site occupancy, maximum site occupancy that has public open spaces and total open spaces within lot or TOSL with paved areas and unpaved areas. So the minimum site occupancy shall be governed by the use type of construction and height of the building and the use area, nature and location of the site, and subject to the provision of the local zoning requirements and in accordance with the rules and regulations promulgated by the Secretary. For the maximum site occupancy, it shall be governed by the use of type of construction and height of the building and the use area, nature, and location of the site, and subject to the provisions of the local zoning requirements and in accordance with the following types of open spaces. We have here the public open spaces and the total open spaces within lot or TOSL. Public open spaces examples are the streets, alleys, easements of sea or lake shores, rivers, creeks, esteros, railroad tracks, parks or plazas, playgrounds, and others. And for the total open spaces within lot, examples are the courts, yards, gardens, light wells, uncovered driveways, access roads, and parking spaces, which consist of two types, the paved areas and the unpaved areas. Paved areas are the hardscape areas or tiled areas. While the unpaved areas are within the lot that are with exposed soil and planted or softscape. So in section 803, here is the following table that illustrates the reference of table of maximum allowable PSO and maximum allowable ISA, the MACA, the minimum USA, and the TOSL by type of land use zoning per lot. By the way, to get the total lot area or TLA, we need to add the maximum allowable or ISA to the minimum allowable or USA. In section 804, in section 804, sizes and dimensions of courts. Minimum sizes of courts in yards and their least dimensions shall be governed by the use, type of construction, and height of the building as provided hereunder, provided that the minimum horizontal dimension of said courts and yards shall be not less than 2.00 meters. All inner courts shall be connected to a street or yard, either by a passageway with a minimum width of 1.20 meters or by a door through a room or rooms. For the yard, the required open space left between the outermost face of the building or structure and the property lines. The width of the yard is the setback. When we say setback, it means the required separation between a lot line. So here is the table that represents the minimum setbacks for residential buildings or structures and the setbacks for the commercial, industrial, institutional, and recreational buildings. So next, in section 805 are the ceiling heights. Habitable rooms provided with artificial ventilation shall have ceiling heights not less than 2.40 meters measured from the floor to the ceiling. Above stated rooms with a natural ventilation shall have ceiling heights not less than 2.70 meters. And the mezzanine floors shall have a clear ceiling height not less than 1.80 meters above and below it. In section 806, size and dimensions of rooms. So, the minimum sizes of rooms and their least horizontal dimensions shall be as follows. So, number 1, for rooms in human habitations, it should be 6.00 square meters with at least a dimension of 2.00 meters. And for the kitchens, it should be 3 square meters with at least dimension of 1.50 meters. And for the bath and toilet, it should be 1.20 square meters with a least dimension of 0.90 meters. And in section 807, airspace requirements in determining the size of rooms. Minimum air space shall be provided as follows. First, the schoolrooms. It should be 3 cubic meters with 1 square meter of floor area per person. For the workshops, factories, and offices, it should be 12 cubic meters of air space per person. And for habitable rooms, it should be 14 cubic meters of air per person. So in section 808, window openings. Rooms intended for any use not provided with artificial ventilation system shall be provided with a window or windows with a total free area of openings and equal to at least 10% of the floor area of room. Windows shall open directly to a courtyard, public street or alley, or open water courses. And second, ceiling height is not less than 2.70 meters and has one of the longer sides at least 65% open and unobstructed. Eaves and canopies over the windows must be not less than 0.75 meters from the side and rear property lines. So no openings at all types of abutments or firewalls erected along property lines except for permitted vent walls. So in section 809, vent shafts or vent shafts. This undergoes ventilation, skylights, and air ducts. Ventilation is have a horizontal cross-sectional area of not less than 0.10 square meter for every meter of height of shaft, but in no case shall the area be less than 1 square meter. No vent shaft shall have its least dimension less than 600 millimeters or 0.6 meters. For the skylights, unless open to the outer air at the top for its full area, vent shaft shall be covered by a skylight having a net free area or fixed lower openings equal to the maximum required shaft area. And for the air ducts, open to a street or court by a horizontal duct or intake at a point below the lowest window opening. It shall have a minimum unobstructed cross-sectional area of not less than 0.30 square meter with a minimum dimension of 0.3 meters. The openings to the duct or intake shall be not less than 300 millimeters or 0.3 meters. In section 810, ventilation skylights. In ventilation skylights shall have a glass area not less than that required for the windows that are replaced. They shall be equipped with movable sashes or louvers with an aggregate net free area not less than that required for openable parts in the window that are replaced or provided with approved artificial ventilation of equivalent effectiveness. For the last section, section 811, artificial ventilation. For rooms or spaces housing industrial or heating equipment, it shall be provided with artificial means of ventilation to prevent excessive accumulation of hot or polluted air. So this table represents the minimum requirements for air changes. So air changes per hour. So these are for the apartment, banking space, barber shop, beauty parlor, broker's boardroom, cafeteria, cocktail bar, churches, department stores, director's room, drugstore, funeral parlor, gambling rooms, hospital room, hotel room, laboratories, office, restaurant, kitchen, shop or retail, and theaters. So these are the sections under the rule number 8, the light and ventilation.
Here is the Rule 8 continuation. The guidelines on easements, view corridors, or slight line streets, road right-of-way, RROW, sidewalks, arcades, basements, lots, and public buildings and structures. For easements, as it is situated outside of private property limits, the easement is public land that should be equally enjoyed by all members of the community. The easement is not to be used for any form of building or structure that may go against its public recreational character. The allowed or encouraged structures within easements are hardscape pedestrian accessways such as walks, footpaths, or arcades, and other are softscape developments such as park strips, linear parks, and the like, as well as small tree farms, also including concrete steps leading down to the water or wooden boardwalks, or soil stabilization or protection, including anti-erosion scoring measures within the easement. The disallowed and prohibited structures or developments within easement are all semi-enclosed or enclosed, semi-permanent or permanent habitable building projections, particularly arcade structures. Also, all forms of enclosures such as fences, perimeter walls, and the like intended to limit the use of the easement for private enjoyment are prohibited. No portion of the easement, whether at grade, below grade, or above grade, may be leased or developed by the government or by private entities for purposes inconsistent with its character and intended function. Next is the view corridors and/or sightlines. The preservation of view corridors or sightlines are the carriageway roadway portion of the RROW shall be free of structures, and to dignify very important public or historical culture buildings, all forms of commercial signs intruding into RROW leading to or away from such buildings shall not be allowed. It shall not be entirely blocked by the intervening property to allow some sightlines to exist. Allowed structures within the RROW for transportation are elevated ramps, flyovers, tracks, stations, terminals, and like. For streets or road right-of-way, RROW, no building shall be constructed unless it adjoins or has direct access to public space, yard or street on at least one of its sides. All buildings shall face a public street, alley, or a road which has been duly approved by the proper authorities for residential, institutional, commercial, and industrial groups. The allowed or encouraged structures developments within the RROW are the transportation structures and like uses, whether temporary or permanent. Next is the limited commercial structures above grade RROW air rights utilization. Improvements on the RROW and on all its components elements found at all its physical levels are sidewalks, arcades, roadway, carriageway, medians, planting strips, and furnitures. The disallowed and prohibited structures developments at RROW, if it is situated outside of private property limits, the RROW is public land. Any form of semi-permanent or semi-enclosed enclosed commercial structure used and like structures are prohibited. And any form of temporary or semi-enclosed enclosed residential structure used like structures are prohibited. Government structures used unless the same are located below or above grades. In such cases, the proposed structure must be properly planned, designed, and constructed. Also, long-term or overnight vehicle parking is prohibited as a depository of stalled, wrecked, or abandoned vehicles, mechanical devices, and the like. Next is the conduct of other commercial buildings or business activities incompatible with the character of the RROW. Also, unauthorized recreational or entertainment usage is prohibited. Minimum access requirements. Interior or rear lots shall have a RROW access street with a minimum with depending upon the number of buildings or units which is served provided. Multiple living units in same lot on which apartments, row houses, or accessories or a group of single detached buildings are built be provided with our ROW access street directly connecting said buildings or units to a public street, road, or alley following the schedule as shown in Table 8. For commercial or industrial areas, sufficient lane widths, shoulders, and maneuvering spaces for long-bodied articulated vehicles should be considered within the RROW. Privately owned RROW street shall be duly registered and annotated in the lot title as such for as long as the apartments, row houses. Alignment of RROW streets shall be integrated into the existing street network, particularly with the provision of lands of the appropriate width. And no obstruction should exist within the RROW streets servicing multiple housing of more than 75 units. Here are the all kinds of subdivisions and residential condominiums may generally refer to this guideline, the table shown below. Number of dwelling units, minimum width of carriageway or roadway in meters, minimum width of sidewalks on each side, minimum total width of the RROW. The RROW consists of three different physical levels as follows: Pro above grade, Pro at grade, and Pro below grade. Pro above grade, air rights or the right to develop, benefit, and profit from the use of the RROW above grade is given up by the government, public, and should therefore be compensated. Example is the leased and paid for by the proponent and user beneficiary of the proposed building. The minimum clear height for the utilization of air rights above RROW shall be 4.27 meters from the finished ground elevation of the roadway. For pro at grade, this portion of the RROW is generally utilized for the movement of the general public, for the motorist and pedestrian. If this level of RROW is utilized for whatever purpose, the right to develop, benefit, and profit from the use of the RROW at grade is given up by the government and should therefore be compensated with the least and paid for by the development proponent, end user, or beneficiary. For RROW below grade, the RROW is utilized for whatever purpose. The right to develop, benefit, and profit from the use of the RROW below grade is given up by the government, general public, and should therefore be compensated. And for the sidewalks, subject to existing laws and regulation, the local planning authority shall determine which street shall have an open sidewalk or an arcaded sidewalk or a combination of both. The minimum width of the sidewalk for a RROW width of 9 meters or more shall be 1.20 meters on each side of the row RROW or a total of 2.40 meters on both sides of the RROW. For the minimum width of sidewalk for RROW of less than 9 meters wide, as referred to Table 8, sidewalk widths shall be based on the following consideration. A. The volume of pedestrian who will use the sidewalk on a regular basis. B is the type, intensity, or level of operation and side of the following allowed uses occupancies along the RROW. The types and volume of street furniture examples are street lighting and traffic signs or signal supports, pedestrian barriers, aids, and etc. And other urban design elements that will be allowed as permanent developments, design elements that will be allowed as permanent developments within the width of the sidewalk. The width of the planting strips are also considered. The special needs for servicing utility underneath the sidewalk and for utility poles. Compliance with accessibility requirements as stipulated under Batas Pambansa Building 344 Accessibility Law. And provisions for commuters. Examples are waiting sheds, loading and unloading areas. Provisions for vehicle crossing between the roadway and the front yards of lots or buildings, or provisions for loading and unloading platforms if allowed. Need for introduction of allowed uses, elements within the sidewalk area only if there is sufficient sidewalk width. Examples are bicycle lanes, jogging lanes, and the likes. And lastly, the climate and light, ventilation, safety, security, and overall maintenance of the sidewalks, all in the areas. Sidewalks shall be of uniform width throughout the entire length of the street. The sidewalk, width, grade, and finish of the dominant use occupancy along the row shall be generally observed, and the width of the sidewalk shall be as followed, as what is shown in the Table 8G4. The range of required sidewalk and planting strip widths with a total at both sides of RROW and with its width. The widths of the sidewalk shall include both paved and unpaved planted portions. See Table 8. Here examples are the road right-of-way width. Having a width of 30 meters and above, it should have a total minimum of width of planting strip with RROW with 1.20 meters. And the same goes to 25 to 29 having a 0.60 meters as what is shown in the PDF. Grade of sidewalks, driveways, entrances, and exits. Sidewalks shall as much as possible be level and of uniform grade throughout the entire length of the street. Whenever the slope of the street does not exceed 1 over 12, the sidewalk grade shall follow the level or slope of the street. Whenever the slope of the street is 1 over 10, the sidewalk shall be maintained level for every 20 to 40 meters of run. Sidewalks of different levels shall be joined by means of a ramp having any convenient slope not exceeding 1 over 6. When the grade of two connecting sidewalks are between 1 over 10 and 1 over 8, the sidewalk shall be joined by means of a ramp by having any convenient slope not exceeding 1 over 10. Here are examples of a grade sidewalks and driveways access sidewalks. Uh, for E, total open space requirements on lots by use or occupancy, type or location, and suggested minimum lot sizes, lot dimensions, and type by use occupancy. Please refer to the PDF. Lastly, the basements. Maximum configuration of basement levels. While basements may be developed for medium to very high density residential or commercial, institutional, and mixed-use developments, its planning, design, and construction shall be observed the following limitations. A. The minimum road right-of-way or RROW width that services the lot on which the basement can be constructed should be at least 10 meters wide. The prescribed setbacks and yards must be identified for the building or structure above grade inasmuch as the very same setbacks shall apply below grade to determine the maximum depth of or width of the basement level. Next is C. If the code prescriptions for introducing natural light and ventilation into basement levels are first, the maximum depth of basement can be made equal to one half of the height of the building above grade. D. The center portion of all basement levels shall be reserved for the satisfaction of the basement level may extend by a minimum clear distance of 1.40 meters from the outermost face of the building at grade level. E. The outermost face of the building at the second and lower basement levels shall follow the line of the OFB at grade level. And lastly, all drainage structures below grade shall not exceed the OFW below grade. Minimum provisions for natural lighting and ventilation basement levels. If basements are to be developed, and the following minimum provisions for natural light and ventilation shall be satisfied. A. A primary or main natural light and ventilation shaft with a clear distance of at least 3 meters shall be located at the center of the building and shall traverse the entire combined height of the building above and below grade. B. Secondary support, natural light, and ventilation shaft with a clear distance of at least 1.20 meters shall emanate from the front and rear perimeters of the building and shall traverse with entire depth of basement. The angular shaft shall be at an angle of 60 degrees from the horizontal, consistent with the maximum Philippine solar angle. Separate angular shafts emanating from the side perimeters of the building are encouraged. And lastly, both the vertical and angular shaft shall only be used for natural air and light intake and shall not be used for any form of exhaust or air exchange to keep the temperature inside the shafts at a minimum. Last is the design of public buildings. For general, public buildings or permanent edifices owned by the government, whether national or local, its agencies, including government-owned and or controlled corporations. The design of public buildings shall conform to the applicable provisions of the preceding rules and regulations. And C. The architectural character of public buildings must fully express the nature of their function, use, or occupancy and should reflect their identity as public buildings compatible with their total macro and micro environment. For site selection, A. Where a project site is yet to be selected, the potential site must be compatible with the project usage. And for the site analysis, it should show an accurate and thorough understanding of the site. It should include but not limited to consideration of topography, point of access, existing buildings or services, trees, soil characteristic, and etc. For C, the site must be properly and completely described, clearly defining its technical boundaries, showing access thereto such as highway, road, or alley. And for site development, A. Location and orientation. Locate and orient the buildings to maximize the use of natural ventilation and lighting and minimize energy consumption within the constraints of the functional requirements, topography and site configuration. For site drainage, drainage is a basic site design consideration and must be done in conjunction with siting and orientation buildings. And for lastly, grading design. Balance the cut and fill for the entire site as closely as possible to eliminate the need for hauling earth or on or off the site.
For Rule 9 talks about sanitation. Section 901 General Requirements. Subject to the provisions of Book 2 of the Civil Code of the Philippines on property ownership and its modification, all buildings hereafter erected, altered, remodeled, relocated, or repaired for human habitation shall be provided with adequate and potable water supply, plumbing installation, and suitable wastewater treatment or disposal system, stormwater drainage, pest and vermin control, noise abatement device, and other measures required for the protections and promotion of health of person occupying the premises and others living nearby. For Section 902 talks about water supply system. So whenever available, the potable water requirements for a building used for human habitation shall be supplied from existing municipal or city water works system. Number two, the quality of drinking water from meteoric surface or underground sources shall conform to the criteria set in the latest approved national standards for drinking water standards. Number three, the design, construction, and operation of deep wells for the obstructions of groundwater shall be subjected to the provisions of the Water Code of the Philippines, PD 1067. Number four, the design, construction, and operation of independent waterworks systems of private housing, subdivision, or industrial estates shall be governed by existing laws relating to local waterworks system. And number five, the water piping installation for water supply and distribution to each fixture, including the wastewater drainage with proper venting inside building and premises, shall conform to the provisions of the revised National Plumbing Code of the Philippines. Section 903 Wastewater Disposal System. Sanitary sewage from buildings and neutralized or pre-treated industrial wastewater shall be discharged directly into the nearest street sanitary sewer main of existing municipal or city sanitary sewerage system in accordance with the criteria set by the Code on Sanitation of the Philippines and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources or the DENR. Number two, all buildings located in areas where there are no available sanitary sewerage system shall dispose their sewage to IMHOF or septic tank and subsurface absorption field or to a suitable wastewater treatment plant or disposal system in accordance with the Code on Sanitation of the Philippines and the revised National Plumbing Code of the Philippines. Number three, sanitary and industrial plumbing installations inside buildings and premises shall conform to the provisions of the revised National Plumbing Code of the Philippines. Section 904, Storm Drainage System. Rainwater drainage shall not discharge to the sanitary sewer system. Number two, adequate provision shall be made to drain rainwater from low areas in buildings and their premises. Number three, the drainage pipe installation and sewerage system of any premises and or connections with any public disposal or any acceptable terminal shall conform to the revised National Plumbing Code of the Philippines. Section 905, Pest and Vermin Control. All buildings with hollow and or wood construction shall be provided with rat proofing. Number two, garbage bins and receptacles shall be provided with ready means for cleaning with positive protection against entry of pests and vermin. Number three, dining rooms for public use without artificial ventilation shall be properly screened. For Section 906, Noise Pollution Control, industrial establishments shall be provided with positive noise abatement device to tone down the noise level of equipment and machineries to acceptable limits set down by the Department of Labor and Employment and the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources. Number two, noise as an unwanted sound both in quality and intensity and excessive vibration whose sources in buildings or structures construction shall conform to acceptable limits the required emission standards of DENR. Section 907, Pipes Materials. All pipe materials to be used in buildings or structures shall conform to the standard specifications of the Bureau of Product Standards or the BPS of the Department of Trade and Industry, DTI. And that's the end of Rule 9. Let's proceed to Rule 10. Talks about the building projections over public street. So, Section 1001, General Requirements. Number 1. No part of any building or structure or any of its appendages shall project beyond the building line, except as provided herein. Number 2. The projection of any structure or appendage over a public property shall be the distance measured horizontally from the property line to the outermost point of the projection. Section 1002, Projection into alleys or street. Number 1. No part of any structure or its appendage shall project into any alley or street, national road, or public highway except as provided in the code. Number 2. Footings located at least 2.40 meters below grade along national roads or public highway may project not more than 300 millimeters beyond the property line, provided that said projection shall not obstruct any existing utilities or services such as power, water, sewer, gas, communication, and drainage lines, and etc., unless the owner concerned shall pay the corresponding entities for the rerouting of the parts of the affected utilities. Number 3, foundations may be permitted to encroach into public sidewalk areas to a width not exceeding 500 millimeters, provided that the top of the said foundation is not less than 600 millimeters below the established grade, and provided further that said projection shall not obstruct any existing utilities or services such as power, water, sewer, gas, communication, and drainage lines, etc., unless the owner concerned shall pay the corresponding entities for the rerouting of the parts of the affected utilities. For Section 1003, talks about projection of balconies and appendages over streets. So number 1, the extent of any projection over an alley or street shall be uniform within a block and shall conform to the limitations set forth. Number 2, the clearance between the established grade of the street and or sidewalk and the lowest undersurface of any part of the balcony shall not be less than 3 meters. Number 3, in case the projection is a neon sign and the like, the same shall be in accordance with the Rule 20 signs. So Section 1004 talks about arcades. So whenever required by existing building and zoning regulations, arcades shall be constructed on sidewalks of streets. So the width of the arcade and its height shall be uniform, as you can see in this picture. The width of the arcades and height shall be uniform throughout the street, provided that in no case shall an arcade be less than 3 meters above the established sidewalk grade. Number 2, arcaded pedestrian walkways shall have a clear height of 3 meters. Driveways crossing arcaded pedestrian walkways shall be at the same level with that of the arcades for the safety of the pedestrians. Well, there should be no hanging signs, projecting signs, nor ground signs within the entire length of the arcade area. Signs should be above, part of, or above the storefront windows, and all doors must swing inward to prevent accidents. For Section 1005 talks about canopies, marquees. Canopy or marquee is a permanent roof structure above a door attached to and supported by the building and projecting over a wall or sidewalk. So this includes any object or decorations attached thereto. Number 2, projection and clearances. So these are the horizontal clearance between the outermost edge of the marquee and the curb line shall be not less than 300 millimeters. So the vertical clearance between the pavement or ground line and the undersurface of any part of the marquee shall not be less than 3 meters. So next is construction. A marquee shall be constructed of incombustible material or materials of not less than 2 or fire-resistive construction. So it shall be provided with necessary drainage facility. So location, every marquee shall be so located as not to interfere with the operation of any exterior standpipe connection or to obstruct the clear passage from stairway exits from the building or the installation of maintenance of electroliers. Section 1006, movable awnings or hoods. Awning is a movable shelter supported entirely from an exterior wall of a building and of a type which can be retraced, folded, or collapsed against the face of a supporting building. Number 2 is clearance. The horizontal clearance between the awning and the curved line shall not be less than 300 millimeters. So the vertical clearance between the undermost surface of the awning and the pavement of ground line shall be not less than 2.40 meters. Collapsible awnings shall be so designated that they shall not block our required exit when collapsed or folded. Section 1007, doors, windows, and the like. Doors, windows, and the like less than 2.40 meters above the pavement or ground line shall not, when fully opened or upon opening, project beyond the property line except fire exit doors. So Section 1008, corner buildings with chaflans. So every corner buildings or solid fence in a public street or alley less than 3.60 meters in width shall be truncated at the corner. The face of the triangle so formed shall be at right angle to the bisector of the angle of the intersection of the street lines, provided that in no case shall the length of the chaflan be less than 4 meters. So the corner buildings or solid wall fences to be built abutting property lines on corners or public alley or street intersections shall be provided with chaflans to afford a clear view. If the building is arcaded, no chaflan is required, notwithstanding that the width of the public street or alley is less than 3.60 meters. So the foregoing examples assume that the building faces are flush with the property lines. For example, no setbacks provided. These examples are thus only possible if the arcades to be introduced are either within the property line or within the RROW. Example is the one that lists of the air rights for the arcade structures or the spaces directly above the arcade shall be absolutely necessary. So and that's the end for Rule 10.
So we have here in Rule 11, which is the protection of pedestrians during construction or demolition. So under this rule, we have section 1101, which is the general requirements, and states here that no person shall use or occupy a street or alley or public sidewalk. Then no person shall perform any work or any building or structure adjacent to a public way in general use for pedestrian travel, unless the pedestrians are protected as specified in this rule. Then any material or building structure temporarily occupying public property, including fence, canopies, and walkways, shall be adequately lighted
between sunset and sunrise. So the next one is section 1102, which is the storage in public property. So when it is placed or stored in any public property, those materials and equipment shall not obstruct free and convenient approach to and use of any fire hydrant, fire or police alarm box or utility box or catch basin or manhole, and also not interfere with any drainage, and shall be piled or stacked in an orderly manner not higher than 1.8 meters. So the next one is section 1101, which is the mixing mortar on public property. So under this section, it states here that it is not allowed to mix mortar or any concrete materials on a public streets. Then the next one is section 1104, which is the protection of utilities. So those public or private utilities and services above or below the ground shall be protected from any damage by any work being done under the permit. And including here is the temporary light and power. And those temporary electrical services shall be self-supporting or adequately braced or guided at all times. Then we have also here section 1105, which is the walkway. So when the building official authorizes a sidewalk to be fenced or closed during construction or any demolition work, then a temporary walkway shall be provided or not less than 1.20 meters, and it should be capable of supporting a uniform live load of 650 kg per square meters. A wearing surface shall be provided, and it should be durable enough in order to survive throughout the work or the construction work. Then a temporary walkway adjacent to the street line shall be provided where the street has no sidewalk but not less than 600 millimeters wide, and where the right road of way is 5 meters or less, then no temporary walkway shall be allowed. Then the next one is the section 1106, which is the pedestrian protection. Protective railings on the street side shall be required when walkway occupies part of roadway. Then shall be built strong and sturdy and not be less than by 1 meter. Then shall we have also here fences, which is it states here that shall entirely enclose the construction or demolition site. Then shall be erected on the building of sidewalks or walkways. Then shall be made of approved materials, and sample of those approved materials are sheet, wooden boards or planks, or plywood or lawanet, and we have also sawali. And fences should not less than 2.4 meters in height above the curb line. But when the horizontal distance between the outermost when the horizontal distance between the outermost face of the building and the inner edge of the sidewalk is equal to one half or less to the height of the building, then a canopy shall be required in addition to a fence. So the protective canopy shall have a clear and unobstructed height of 2.4 meters above the walkway, and shall be made of sufficient strength and stability, and can withstand shocks incident to the handling of such materials, and capable of safely sustaining a load of 4,800 Pascal. Deck flooring of a canopy shall consist of planking not less than 50 millimeters thickness. Then underside of the canopy shall be properly lighted at night with not less than 100 watts but bulb every 6 meters of its length. We have also here the warning signs and lights that needs to be posted around the property while illuminated during night. And those entrances, exits to and from the site shall be kept closed at all times except during actual passage of men, materials, or equipment, and it shall be properly maintained even when the operation are not in progress. Then the next one, 7. Then the next one, which is section 1107, which is maintenance and removal of protective devices. So we have here maintenance. So we have here the maintenance, and that those protective devices shall be properly maintained in place, kept in good order for the entire length of time pedestrians may be endangered. So under here is the average light intensity and illumination. There shall have a sufficient light not less than 200 lux in all parts of the building under construction, and not less than 500 lux in the location where the tools located. Then we have also here the welding and cutting, which is welding and cutting and arc welding and construction demolition operations shall be restricted to experienced workers accredited by the TESDA, shall not be done above pedestrians and workers, and shall not be carried out in any place where ample ventilation is not provided or from which quick escape is difficult. We have also here the special typhoon precautions. Then those materials and equipment shall be secured against displacement by wind. Mhm. By wind forces. Then the next one is the hoisting machinery, which is those machinery or hoisting engine shall be provided with adequate brakes capable of holding the maximum load at any point of travel. Then a tagline or guide rope shall be used on all loads being hoisted or lowered. And then the next one is the platform hoist. Platform hoist for the handling of materials in building under construction shall have the car substantially constructed and provided with covers. Then suitable overhead protection is provided. The covers may be omitted. Then hoist shall be equipped with a broken rope safely device. Then ano ba yan? Nasaan na ni? Then we have also here the hoist towers. Those hoist towers shall be screened or otherwise protected on all sides to a height of not less than 1.80 meters and shall be secured in not less than four directions against swaying or tipping and at intervals of not more than 10 meters in its height. We have also here the derricks and cranes. Then those derricks shall be so designed and assembled that no part shall be stressed beyond the safe working stress for the material under its maximum rated load. Then we have also here the cables, ropes, chains, and blocks. And those cables, chains, ropes shall be of such size that the maximum load supported by them will not exceed one-sixth of their breaking strength. Breaking strength. Then ladders and temporarily stairway. Um, Ladders shall be provided to give access to all floors, staging, or platforms where work is being done more than 5 story above ground or above a permanent or temporarily floor. Then shall not be extended by joining two or more together. Not single ladder shall exceed 6 meters in length, and landing ladders shall be at least 1.20 meters square and equipped with handrails and two boards. Then ladder rungs shall be spaced uniformly and as near to 300 millimeters as practicable. Then height exists of 18 meters and it has not been practicable to install the permanent stairways. At least one temporary stairway shall be provided. Then shall extend at least 900 millimeters above the level of such floors or stagings or platforms. Then, when used temporarily in place, or stairways or runways shall be at least 1 meters wide if separate ladders, and provided with mark which is up and down. Then shall be of sufficient strength to support a load of at least 4,800 Pascal. Then height of the two risers and the width of one thread shall be not less than 460 millimeters nor more than 700 millimeters. Then a temporary stairways shall be not less than 900 millimeters wide. Then shall be not less than 750 millimeters long, and no flight of stairs of temporary stairways shall have a vertical rise in exist of 3.60 meters. Then we have also here runways and ramps, which shall be constructed of at least 3 25 by 250 millimeters planks laid closely side by side and substantially supported and braced to prevent unequal deflection and springing action. Then shall have a slope not greater than 1:3. Then the rise is steeper than 1:3. Runways or ramps shall be provided with cleats spaced not more than 20 millimeters apart. Then the total rise of more than 1.80 meters or passing over or near floor openings, high tension wires or other dangerous places shall be provided with guardrails and two boards. We have also here the scaffolds. Then all such scaffolds shall be substantially constructed to support at least 4 times the maximum load and shall be secured to prevent swaying. Then shall be not less than 50 millimeters nominal thickness, and which is more than every scaffold the platform level of which is more than 1.8 meters above the ground or above a permanent or temporary floor. Then we have also here the temporary flooring, which is working floor shall be planked over, and building of wood joist construction, the immediate underfloor shall be laid for each floor as the building progress. Then floor openings shall be protected on all sides by solid barriers or railings with two boards not less than 900 millimeters high. Then we have also here guardrails and two boards which shall have the top rail not less than 900 millimeters, shall have support not more than 2.40 meters apart, and the horizontal force of 30 kilogram, and withstand with a horizontal force of 30 kilograms per square meters, and shall extend not less than 150 millimeters above the platform levels, and shall be placed to fit close to the edges of the platform. Then shall be not less than the two boards of metal shall be not less than of 25 millimeters nominal thickness, with support not more than 1.20 meters apart. Then the two boards of metal shall be not less than 30 millimeters thick, with support not more than 1.20 meters apart. Then the next one is the removal, which is every protective fence or canopy shall be removed within only 30 days after such protection is no longer required or determined by the building officials. Then the last one we have here the section 1108, which is the demolition. Then it states here that the work if the work if the work is difficult or dangerous, then it should be done by a contractor experienced in such work. Then before demolition is commenced, notice of intention to proceed should be given to the adjoining owners of the buildings. Then before commencing to demolish a building or repair a badly damaged building, flooring, shoring, typing, and strutting are necessary to prevent movement. Then for the purpose of arranging shores, ties, and other security measures, a survey of the existing building and the adjoining owner's building should be made prior to the demolition, and, where possible, particulars of existing wall foundation and of the subsoil should be obtained. The demolition should be done as much as possible, floor by floor. Then should be taken to dispose care debris should take those dispose of debris as it rises. Then funds or catch platforms forms should be provided over public footways, etc. Then to protect workmen and occupants of adjoining building and the general public from falling debris during demolition. Then the next one is the precautions before demolition. So before commencing the work of demolition, then all of the building or any structure, then all gas, electric, water, and other utility meters shall be removed. Then all electric power shall be shut off. Then no electric cable or other apparatus other than those especially required for use in connection with the demolition work then shall remain electrically charged during demolition operations. Then all necessary steps shall be taken to prevent. Then all entrances, exits to and from the building shall be properly protected during the demolition process. Then we have also here the chutes. Then chutes for the removal of materials and debris shall be provided in all parts of demolition operations which are more than 6 meters above the point from which material is to be removed. Then shall be equipped at intervals of 6 meters or less with substantial stops to prevent descending materials. Then when it is more than 45 degrees from the horizontal, shall be completely enclosed on all four sides except for openings at or about floor level of at each floor, then for the receiving of materials or debris. But when it is less than 45 degrees with the horizontal, may be left open on the upper side. Then opening into which materials or debris are dumped at the top of a chute shall be protected by a substantial guardrail extending at least 1.80 meters above the level of the floor. Then chute openings where materials or debris are dumped from wheelbarrows, a two-board or bumper not less than 150 millimeters high and 50 millimeters nominal thickness shall be provided. Then we have also here the demolition of walls and chimneys. Then no walls or section of walls whose height is more than 22 times its thickness shall be permitted to stand without lateral bracing unless it is in a good condition. Then before demolishing within 3 meters of any opening in the floor immediately below, such opening shall be substantially planked over, unless all workmen are removed from all floors below and access to such floors is positively prevented. Then walkways shall be provided, but not less than three planks, properly tied or nailed to bearers or not less than 560 millimeters in width. Then we have also here the demolition of floors, which is demolition of floors and floor beams. The floors and beams shall be completely supported by temporary planking and supports. Then the load is transferred to lower floors. These floors shall be carefully propped. Then the demolition of floors shall not be started until the surrounding floor area to a distance of 6 meters have been entirely cleared of debris and other unnecessary materials. Then a temporary protection shall be sound and at least 25 millimeters thick. We have also here the other safeguards, which is the building official shall require strict compliance with the minimum safety standards as prescribed under administrative order of the DOLE. Then a device or piece of equipment which is unsafe shall be reported in the superintendent or foreman, who shall take immediate steps to remedy such condition or remove such device or equipment. Then no person, firm, or corporation, either personally or through an employee or agent of another, shall operate or move any machinery. Then machinery, equipment, materials, scaffolds closer than 5 meters to any energized high voltage overhead electric facilities unless it is authorized by the electrical inspector. That's all. Thank you.